Everyone's aware. Get our timer started here. All right. Well, I hope everyone's having a great day so far. Welcome. Thanks for joining this program. It's one of our Small Bites, Big Impact Lunch and Learn series programs. So hopefully you're all in the right place. Today's topic is non-defensive communication. This is part 3 of a 3-part series. So it is the final one of this series. And today we're focusing on non-defensive predictions. So really appreciate you being here today. And I hope you will all enjoy and engage. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Before we dive into the content, I just want to quickly go over some logistics for today's sessions. And some of you in the room may be very familiar with these from our programs and others. But as you can tell already, and thanks, Kiersey, for keeping that chat going. Great. You are muted, and I did turn your cameras off. And so in the security, I did not give you permissions to redo that. So let's just keep those off. It really helps with the recording quality. It also helps reduce distractions. And of course, if you're taking this opportunity to sneak in some food, it allows you to eat in peace. So we'll keep all of that in mind. I am going to use the poll function as well as the chat. So if you haven't already, go ahead and take this time to open up that chat box now. That is where I will have you respond to questions that I pose. And it's also a place where you can pose questions that you may have along the way. Of course, as most of you know by now, using Zoom every day, your name does appear in the chat function. So just keep that in mind if you have any concerns regarding privacy. While I am presenting, our Ombuds Director, Kiersey will field any non-substantive questions. So go ahead and use the chat box for those as well. She'll be monitoring that. Hello, Kiersey. Thank you.
Hi,
yes, wave to everybody. And we will have some Q&A time at the end. I'll check in periodically to check questions, but I may reserve the right to hold that until the end to make sure we get through everything. And of course, if you have a specific situation that either you're not sure is appropriate for today or you're not comfortable using the chat box for it, give us a call. Just call the Ombuds office. We'll have all that contact information at the end, and feel free to schedule your own separate consultation. We do aim to keep these at 30 minutes. The idea is to give you bite-sized amounts of information that you can take and use and get back to your day. And we are, as I've already noted, recording this session so that we can reach as many people as possible, including those who are unable to attend at this time. I am going to read things out loud, and that you might find that annoying, and I apologize for that. It's really for the benefit of those who are attending by phone. I'm not sure if we have anyone attending by phone, but I will try to read things out loud, including the polls for those folks. And rest assured that while Kiersey will do a great job, I'm sure, of putting links in as we go into the chat, I did send out an email last Friday. So if you registered before Friday, you got a lot of the links already to past video recordings and blog posts, but we'll be including links to the book. And of course, after today's session, I will provide a follow-up email to everyone on the registration list with all of those links again, as well as the recording link for today. So don't feel like if you can't copy and paste from the chat, don't worry. We will provide all of that to you. Okay, so without further ado, I don't see anything in the chat quite yet. So let's, no problem, Vanessa. Welcome. I know that you just came from Inclusive Leadership, so thanks for joining us. All right, so moving right along here, today we are talking about, we're continuing this conversation about this power struggle, and this comes from insights from Sharon Strand Ellison's book, Taking the War Out of Our Words, The Art of Powerful Non-Defensive Communication. And in her book, if you've read it, you would know, and you've probably heard me say, she asserts that here in the US of America, our communication has become combative, and that our everyday conversations have turned into what she deems these power struggles. And she defines power struggle as a situation in which 2 or more people or groups are competing for control in some particular sphere, which typically then results in defensive reactions. And while this isn't great, the good news is that Ellison says, we can shift this. We can use communication tools to shift this dynamic. And she offers 3 conversation tools in particular to diminish this power struggle. And as you all know, we've been talking about them. The first one we talked about back in March of 2021 was questions, right? Asking non-defensive questions. Then in December, we talked about making non-defensive statements. And today we're going to talk about predictions. So in part 1, I discussed the value of asking and forming non-defensive questions with the goal of unlocking information, disarming defensiveness, and interrupting this power struggle. In part 2, I discussed the statement, and this is us providing information, right? Discussing how stating our reactions to what another person is saying in a neutral, sincere, and honest way can help eliminate that defensiveness, achieve more clarity, and foster progress. So that's always the goal. Today, we're shifting our focus to the prediction. And the purpose of the prediction is to provide clear information about how we're going to respond to various choices the other person might make. Predictions, and we'll talk about this more, are not intended to be manipulative. They're not really even an attempt to try to coerce someone into complying with what we want or doing what we want, but they must be secure, predictable, and stable. Those are the key elements. And when we offer predictions in this neutral and clearly defined way, we meet our needs and we keep ourselves and the other people involved out of this power struggle. So thank you, Kiersey. Kiersey went ahead and put that link in the chat to the book. This is the book that all of this is based on by Sharon Strand Ellison. Okay, quick poll, if I can get my little toolbar to appear here, just to get a sense of who's in the room. And of course, my toolbar is not appearing, so I may have to skip that. I'm not sure why. Here we go, polls, here we go. So I'm gonna go ahead and launch this poll. It's the only poll you'll have today, so bear with me. You should see it now. The question is, I attended or watched the video recordings of Non-Defensive Communications Part 1 and 2 and or read the associated blog posts. So this is just thanks for doing this, you guys. This is really just to give me a sense of who's here, so I kind of know what you're bringing to the table. And rest assured, if you can't remember or you didn't, no judgment, it's all fine. You may feel a little like, ooh, I don't have all the context and background. After today, you can always go back and watch those video recordings and or read the blog posts to fill in any gaps. But I am going to do a quick refresher because we do have 43% of you, at least. Some don't remember, don't know what I'm talking about. Thank you for your honesty, by the way, who have not done that. So we'll do a quick refresher. So for those of you who might be on the phone, only 35% or 34% said yes, they have. 43% said no, 20% can't remember, and 2% have no idea what I'm even talking about. So I'm going to go ahead and poll now. But rest assured, and here for those of you in the Zoom meeting, here are the results. You can see them for yourselves. Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing that now and keep us moving forward here. Okay. So quick refresher, maybe. All right, here we go. Back in March, I know it feels like forever ago, on the 30th, I presented part 1. And that was really talking about the reality that most of us don't ask enough questions. And there's value in asking questions, especially asking them in a non-defensive way, right? One, they help us clarify any assumptions that we're making. They allow us to gather more information. They establish this idea of separateness, which really separates the people from the issue. So you can focus on what's going on. It doesn't become personal, right? Get out of those personal attacks. And then it also increases accountability. We also learned that non-defensive questions have 4 elements. They're curious, open, neutral, and inviting, okay? Then in December, we talked about statements, the elements of non-defensive statements. And statements are an opportunity to provide information, share feedback, state reactions that we're having to what we're experienced, in a neutral way. And the goal of these statements is to be both vulnerable and direct, right? Because when we can be vulnerable and direct, we strengthen our communication, and we more often than not will elicit a more positive response than if we stay in this more guarded stance where we're hiding information. Kind of think about, when someone can't admit when they're wrong or can't admit that they don't know something. So the more vulnerable we can be when we're sharing our experience or reporting out on information that we're gleaning from a conversation or a situation, the better able we are to resolve problems. Because when we don't, we actually impede that progress. So that was really the idea behind the statements, the characteristics being that they're vulnerable, that you're being vulnerable and direct, that you're clearing the air, you're staying neutral, and you're hopefully disarming the other party. All right. So here are the resources. Again, don't panic. For those of you in the room, you can see them here. They'll be in the follow-up email. For those of you on the phone, if you can watch the recording, you'll see them there. But these are the links to the past video recordings in the blog posts covering both questions and statements. All right. And that was also in the email that I sent out last Friday. So for those of you who received that, you should have them there. So feel free to, you can refer back to these as needed. So as I mentioned in the beginning, today we're focusing on the non-defensive prediction. And the purpose of the prediction is to provide clear information about how we're going to respond to the various choices the other person can make. And again, they shouldn't be manipulative. We're not trying to coerce people to comply with what we want. We're trying to offer a secure, predictive, stable explanation, boundary, if you will, for what we're going to do depending on how they choose to respond. So we're doing this, like I said, in a neutral, clear way, and we're meeting our needs, and we're keeping ourselves out of this power struggle by doing this. So some characteristics of an effective prediction are keeping the consequences as small as possible, giving the other person an opportunity to control the duration, right? Maybe they can change course, making sure that the consequences are proportionate and on point to whatever the issue is that we're trying to address, and that they're foreseeable, right? That you're not offering up predictions or consequences that you yourself cannot tolerate. So the two I have here on the screen are, one, telling the person how you will respond, like we talked about, right? Depending on how they choose to act given the situation. And then the second one is telling the person what consequences you believe he or she will experience in life as a consequence of certain choices. So the second one, and we'll talk more about this, are things that you might not have control over, but you're helping someone see the potential outcomes or consequences of depending on the choices they make. Whether those will happen or not, you can't say for sure. It's more of a subjective analysis rather than objective, but you can tell them, what you believe might happen. So let's explore both of those a little bit more. So the first one that I use is what we call a limit setting prediction. And this is creating boundaries and establishing, how we're going to respond given the choices that they make. And let me just look in the chat here. Is this Kiersey providing some more info? Okay, great. Thanks, Kiersey. The second one was more of a challenge choice. That's what we call those, challenge choice predictions. And this, again, is what we predict might happen given their choice, given choices they make. So it's more of what I think of when I'm dealing with my children, what I consider natural consequences of something that they may or may not do. Okay, so let's look at some examples of this. Let's look at a limit setting example. So let's say if I say to my teenager, if you bring your laundry downstairs by noon, I'll do it for you. If you do not bring it down by noon, you're going to have to do it yourself. So I'm protecting, right, my time and my resources, and I'm making it very clear what the consequences are depending on how she decides to behave or react. So a couple of things when you're thinking about these limit setting predictions is you're evaluating the issue. What is it that you're really trying to address? Well, I'm really trying to address, I only have so much time in a day, and I need her to make a decision based on that. So I need to protect my time. I'm also discerning very specific. I'm creating a very specific prediction. I'm giving two alternatives, right? Either it's down by noon and I'll do it, or it's not down by noon and I'm not going to do it. It's very specific. It's very clear. And then, of course, I have to be prepared to follow through. And that, for many of us, is probably one of the harder, at least speaking for myself, one of the harder things is, whatever consequences or predictions I put out there, I need to be able to live with and to follow through on, right? It should be definitive, and we'll talk more about that. The second one is that challenge choice. And like I said, this is more of you're predicting what might happen based on maybe your own experiences or what information you have available to you. So it's not a definitive because it's not something you have control over, but it might be something like, I believe, right? That might be a good way to start. I believe that if you keep interrupting your employees during team meetings, they're likely to feel disrespected, not want to participate, and maybe less likely to listen to you. If you start listening without interrupting, I think they'll feel respected. They'll want to contribute more, and maybe they'll be more willing to hear what you have to say. So I don't know if those outcomes are going to happen or not, but this is a challenge choice of sharing with this person what I predict could be the possible outcomes. All right, I'm just going to check in on the chat here. I don't see anything there. Feel free if you have comments or questions to put them in there. I will be posing some questions too here in just a few moments, so hang in there. All right, the other thing I want to touch on here are two vital points, particularly around the challenge choice. And I think these, are, like I said, making sure we use more subjective language, like I believe or I think, because we don't know, right? It's an objective fact. The other thing is that first one there, not being repetitive. I always get torn on this because people say, oh, it takes people, so they have to hear something 7 times before they actually hear it. But I don't think we probably want to repeat our challenge choice 7 times. It could come as nagging or badgering. So probably not repeating that over and over. Saying it once or twice is probably plenty. All right, so let's go ahead and work through a scenario. And this is going to look very familiar if you were part of that 20 or so % that have read the blogs or attended previous lunch and learns on non-defensive communication. It's, again, Pat and Chris. And again, this is in the blog post for non-defensive communication. It's actually part 4 for the prediction. So if you missed something here today, you can always go read that. It's laid out there as well. All right, so let's read this. Pat is Chris's supervisor. They have worked together for a little over a year. Pat asked Chris to complete a report by the end of the week. Funding for a large department project relied on the report. A payroll system error, however, came up during the week, and Chris spent the week fixing that. Chris felt badly that he didn't complete the report as Pat had requested. And now in hindsight, he's wondering, did he make the right decision and did he handle the situation well? Okay, so let's see how this plays out. So here's our potential conversation. We have Pat, the supervisor, saying, the assignment is due today. Is it complete? Chris, the employee, I didn't have time to complete it. I've been working on the payroll system problem that needed to be fixed right away. Pat, this is his statement, right? I understand the payroll problem had to be fixed, and I was counting on you to finish the report I asked you to complete by today. Not having the report ready means that we are not going to have funding for project XYZ. We can't let this happen again. Next time you find that you have competing priorities or won't be able to meet a critical deadline because of other projects, let me know right away so we can discuss it, work out the priorities, or maybe even get someone else to help make sure we get both projects done. And I know I ad-libbed a little bit, so I didn't read it word for word. Okay, so here's a possible prediction. I know some of you are going to think this sounds harsh, but I'm just really trying to keep it simple to make a point here. So Pat's prediction in this scenario might be something along the lines of competing priorities and deadlines, they're going to inevitably happen, right? So when it does, let me know so we can figure it out together. If you don't let me know and we do miss another deadline, I'm afraid I will need to take disciplinary action. So the prediction is setting a consequence that, I'm being realistic. I know this is going to happen. He's trying to be empathetic. And at the same time, it's either you do work with me so we can figure this out and have success, have a successful project, or there's going to be, if you choose not to do that, I do have to take that next step, right? That specific action. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead, checking in here. I don't see anything yet. All right, so here are a few things before I'm going to ask you to take a look at a scenario yourselves and provide some thoughts on what a prediction might look like. But first, let's just take a look at some of the questions that you might ask when considering a prediction. The first one is, am I willing to make a clear prediction about how I will react to various choices a person might make? Okay, that's the first one. I do see the chat, so I'll go check that in a second. Will I accept whatever choice the other person makes? Is my prediction protective? All right, and what does that mean? Will you offer enough information so they can make an informed decision, right? The decision is still theirs, but based on the probable consequences and knowing what the consequences are, can they make an informed choice? Is my prediction neutral, right? Again, you're not trying to compel or influence. You're trying to give them the information they need to make an informed choice. It's up to them how they're going to respond. Is my prediction definitive, right? You're providing precise information about how you will react to a particular choice they might make. Is my prediction absolute, right? It's got to be non-negotiable. Can't be wishy-washy or change. I mean, if you get new information, perhaps, right? But based on the information you have to be definitive. And is my prediction double-sided? Usually you want to have two alternatives. While the second alternative may be present by implication, you might not have to expressly say it. Verbalizing both can be helpful. Like I did back in the laundry example, right? If you do this by this, then this. If you do this by then this. All right, I'm going to go hold before I ask you to take a look at this. It looks like we have a comment or a question. It is, what if the prediction causing unintended consequences of the person's response? For example, if you do blank, I'm going to be happy. A people-pleasing person may choose that or say yes, even though that is not the right answer. Okay. So if I'm understanding this, and this is Kunta, thanks for that. So, right, we're not necessarily going to, control based on their conflict style or their personality. We're simply setting boundaries, right, for what the consequence will be. How they choose to apply that is really up to them. So you're right. I mean, if it's a people pleasing person, yeah, sure, they may choose something, but the idea is if you're stating your predictions in a way that's neutral, it really shouldn't be compelling them to do something one way or the other. You're basically laying out the information in a neutral way so they can make an informed based decision. Maybe you can let me know if that helps answer that. And then I have a direct message here that I'll read after, because I'm guessing they don't want that read out loud. So let's keep going, and I'll come back to this towards the end, if that's okay. Yes, okay, so the direct message is asking, like, does it feel like a threat? And I could definitely see that, so thank you for bringing that up. It could be an extreme. So the comment to me was, okay, so I'm getting permission to read it without reading the name, so let me do that. This person is asking this. Pat is being clear when saying he will have to take disciplinary action if Chris doesn't loop him in next time. But if this is the first time this has happened and it feels extreme, like an extreme reaction, do we really need to throw that in? It feels almost like a threat. So I could definitely see that. And that's why I said it might sound harsh. It might seem a bit much. And I was trying to just make a point. The point really is whatever it is, whether it's disciplinary action or something else, yes, it should be proportionate. Absolutely. If that feels too extreme, then it might be something different than disciplinary action. That's up to the PAT in the scenario to discern and use their judgment. And yes, we don't want it to feel like a threat, and we want that person to be fully informed on what the consequence will be. So a lot of that is going to be depending on the relationship and the rapport and how you deliver that, the tone you use in delivering it. We don't want it to be threatening. However, I want to know, or the person needs to know what that consequence is going to look like. Because I want to really have that, take that into consideration before I decide how to respond. Okay. All right. Yes, neutral, and then thank you. Neutral is the key. Okay, so thank you for those. Thank you for engaging in that way. That's helpful. Hopefully my responses were helpful as well. For the sake of time, I am going to keep going, and we can always come back to these at the end if needed. Happy to do that. Okay, so moving right along, the next scenario is really for you to practice, and I want you to use the chat to go ahead and share, like, what might a prediction look like for you? And again, using your own personality, your own judgment about how you would handle this. A student calls the financial aid office shouting about a perceived unfairness. Shouting is kind of the key here. After asking a few non-defensive questions and making a non-defensive statement, the student continues shouting. So what prediction might you offer this student? Let's go ahead and use the chat for that. And if you want to direct message me and I can share those out without you revealing your name, that works for me. I'm happy to do that too. Anyone have any thoughts? I don't see anything popping up yet. Okay, here we go. Neutral. Yes, you want it to be neutral. And what words might you say? If you keep shouting, I may not be able to resolve your issues, right? If you can't speak with me in a respectful, rational manner, we may have to try to have this conversation at a time. Correct? That's another good one, right? So you're saying either the shouting's got to stop. You might even be more specific, right? The shouting needs to stop for me to continue this conversation, right? If the shouting continues, I will need to terminate this conversation. You could be more, and again, that might be too direct for some people. Yes, I'm happy to assist you. And to do that, I need you to stop shouting, right? Remember, being direct is key here, really spelling out and being specific of what behavior is going to result in what consequence. Okay, thank you. These are great. Thank you for sharing those. Michelle says, if you keep shouting, you may need to call back when you can communicate in a calm, professional manner. Yes. Yeah, and you might even have to add in, I'll have to terminate this call and ask you to call back, right? When you can communicate in a calm, professional manner. Yes, big acknowledging, that's right. And that's part of the statement part, right? And I know we're not talking about statements today, but in the statement, you would acknowledge and validate, what's going on for them, and yet you need to set some boundaries. Yes, and then in a direct message I understand that you are upset, but let's talk when you are not so upset. Yes, so if this continues, I understand that you're upset. If this continues, I need to terminate, and we'll have this, and we can have this conversation another time. Yes. Okay, all great. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. Okay. So we're at 28 minutes, so I'm going to speed up this last part here. Time to recap. Who in the chat can list the 3 tools of non-defensive communication? And while you're doing that, I'm going to keep going just for the sake of time here. Hopefully, I know we only talked about one primarily today, but for those of you who have attended all of them, what are the 3 tools of non-defensive communication? Can you remember? So today we talked about non-defensive predictions, right? Which is the 3rd one, providing security through predictability, right? We're foretelling, we're doing it in a neutral, definitive, firm tone, and we're offering alternatives. Yes, thanks, Kira. Statements was the 2nd one, non-defensive statements. We provide information, we're being open, vulnerable, direct, subjective, and descriptive. And yes, thank you. The questions, excellent. Andrea and Kira, the questions, non-defensive questions, we use these, right, to gather information. We remain curious, we're open, we're innocent, we're neutral, and we're inviting, right? We're engaging. So excellent. We got the questions, the statements, and the predictions. Again, you can go back and refer to these in the videos or blogs. So the idea here, the message in sum, is that when we use these tools together and use them effectively, we allow each person or people, there's more persons, if there's more than two, to maintain clarity of their own positions, eliminate, right, diffuse that power struggle, and allow each person to respond with openness and sincerity. It also improves accountability, right? It makes people accountable, and it's an opportunity for personal growth. All right. Here are the resources, the book, as well as today's, the blog post that goes with today. I know Kiersey's been putting those in the chat. They will be in the follow-up email that I send out later today. And again, before I turn it over to questions and stop the recording, I'll just take a second. And I know this is a little hard to read. The contrast isn't great. Contact us if you want to talk about this more, or you have a situation you want to think through or talk about. Call the office, schedule a consult. You can see more of our Lunch and Learn series on our website. You can subscribe to the blog. You can follow us on Twitter. You can watch previous Lunch and Learns. It's all available for you. All right. Again, thank you for being here today. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording if I can get my toolbar to cooperate with me. And then we can go back. Thanks, Ingrid. I see that. So I'm having trouble with the recording. So it's still recording, but feel free to keep putting questions in the chat. Kiersey, go ahead and unmute yourself. If you see any questions that I missed while I'm finding the record, here we go. Stop recording.